This is lecture 18 in our hermeneutics course, and we are continuing our study of how to interpret the Bible. We want to be able to interpret on one end of the spectrum, we want to be able to interpret a whole book of the Bible, the whole thing. Find a synthetic statement that covers the meaning of, that encapsulates the meaning of a whole book of the Bible, or even on a grander scale, what's the meaning of the New Testament? Can we compress the meaning of the New Testament into one sentence? Or the Old Testament? Walk through the Bible is a wonderful source for this kind of synthetic overview of the whole Old Testament even, and the whole New Testament, or even a whole book. But now, in this lecture, not using a telescope to see the grand expanse of a whole book, but now in this lecture, we want to focus in on the microscope view of what does one word mean? What are the meanings, possible meanings of one word in the New Testament or in the Old Testament? So, by way of introduction, this is word studies. Sometimes we sense that a particular word is very significant in the book that we're reading. We want to learn more about exactly what does it mean in the Bible. It might be especially frequent in our passage, or it might be set in a crucial place in the text. We might see that the meaning we are familiar with just doesn't make sense in the passage that we're studying. So there's various reasons for doing word study. You can't do a word study on all of the words of the New Testament or of the Old Testament. That's not strategic. That's not a good way to even start to use your time. So, word study. Well, etymology is the study of where a word came from. Etymology is the historic roots of a word. And we can study the etymology of a word. We can study where the word came from, but this is of secondary importance. Etymology is never the best way to learn the meaning of a word. The word we're interested in might have come from a certain word, or it might be broken down into parts that have their separate meanings, but that's a weak indicator of the meaning of a word. A lot of Greek words are built together with an ek in front and then a root verb. Yes, we can study that. But the real indicator, the best indicator, is always the usage of a word, not its etymology. If you can study the usage of a word, that's much better than studying the etymology. So, usage. How is a word used? When we see that the author we are studying uses a less common word 10 times, and at least 9 of those times it has a certain meaning, it's most likely to have that meaning in the unclear time as well, the 10th and the unclear passage that we also want to study. So we need to see how the word we are interested in is used. Of course, a concordance is very helpful in this process, a paper concordance or a digital concordance. A concordance lists all the words of the Bible alphabetically with references for where they appear and some of the surrounding words to give context. This helps with word studies. It also helps when you think, oh, I know that word is such and such a word, kingdom, so I can get a concordance out. I'm trying to find that verse that mentions the kingdom of heaven. Well, you get a concordance out and you look up kingdom and then you find down where it says kingdom. There's your verse. So concordance can be used for word studies or just remembering verses that we've half forgotten. For this kind of study, be sure you use an exhaustive concordance, which means it's a complete list. An abridged concordance, sometimes at the back of your Bible, can help sometimes, but it won't give you every use of the word. A good Bible program like Accordance will make word studies much quicker. So, hopefully the word that you want to study is used many times by the author that you're studying, or at least it's used many times in the Testament that you're studying. If you're studying the New Testament, then it's used, hopefully your word is used many times in the New Testament. Best if it's used many times by the author that you're studying, but at least you hope that it's used many times in the New Testament that you're studying, or in the Old Testament that you're studying. But many words are more rare, and for these rare words, we might have to try to look at that word's usage outside the Bible, but that's more complicated. Sometimes commentaries will help us with word studies, but watch for bias, watch for prejudice in the author's results. The concordance has no bias, no theology to support, no denominational loyalty. In fact, in a computer, the concordance is computer generated. It doesn't have bias. That's why it's an objective source of information about the usage of a word. So now language. We can study an English word and what it means in an English translation of the Bible, and that will give us a rough idea, a general idea of what that word means when it's used in any particular verse in the Bible. However, word studies in the original languages are much more precise and much more valuable. This is, of course, much easier to do when you have learned the biblical languages, and it's also much easier to do with the Bible programs on our computers. But books like Englishman's Greek Concordance, or Englishman's Hebrew Concordance, Englishman's Greek Concordance, which is available in hardbound book form or as a PDF from the internet at this website. This Englishman's Greek Concordance can help the student that's weak in Greek to see how a particular Greek word is used in the New Testament. So this image shows us some of the verses in the King James Bible that use the word agape. The Englishman's Greek Concordance uses the King James Bible. So we have to be satisfied with that, with this method. And so looking at the Englishman's Greek Concordance of the word agape here, you can see that agape is sometimes translated love and sometimes charity in the King James Version. Well, Greek and Hebrew words are sometimes easy to translate into our languages, but some significant Greek and Hebrew words and grammatical forms do not translate easily into our languages. So again, English word studies are easier to do. Greek and Hebrew word studies are harder but more accurate and more valuable. You can do a Greek word study without knowing the Greek language by using the Englishman's Greek Concordance. So, regardless of the language that you're using, assuming you have a concordance, here are the basic steps to follow to do a word study on a word that's used often in the Bible. First, number one, use a concordance to find the verses that contain the word you want to study. Now, if you study a word like God or grace or law, these words occur so many times that you'll be overwhelmed. You may want to just isolate your search to, that's very computer language, isolate your search. Limit your search to how does one author use this particular word. You don't want to be overwhelmed with 1,000 examples of 1,000 verses to look at. So, once you've found your collection of verses that use the word that you're studying, read through those verses. This is the second step. Read through those verses, and if needed, read their contexts. In some of those verses, the meaning will be obvious, indisputable. It obviously means, and be careful, take a close look before you say, oh, for sure it means this. No, look at it and make sure. But in some of these verses, perhaps the meaning will be quite clear from the context. Mark them I say mark them in a certain color. Maybe you're using a photocopy, or maybe you're using however you do this, you can mark them in a certain color. All the times this word has this particular obvious meaning. Use a different color. If more than one meaning emerges, yes, use a different color. And you can group all the verses together that have this meaning, maybe color code them, and all the verses that have this meaning, color code them, group them together perhaps. You can do this in different ways. And there may be more than two meanings that emerge for a word. It's possible. It's common. Third step. Perhaps in some of those verses, the meaning of the word is not clear. If you honestly look at that verse, well, I think I know what that word means, but it's not clear in this verse that that word means such and such. Well, now be honest in this. Be disciplined and mark the unclear verses. Mark them somehow. Perhaps each verse gets a question mark. Maybe it'll help to read more context, and that'll help you to figure out what. But if not, if it's just unclear, you put a question mark there because you don't know. And you need to be honest, objective in this. Fourth step, if the results are not sufficiently clear yet, if 1, 2, 3, 4 distinct meanings aren't emerging, if too many verses in your collection, in your search, are obscure, unclear meanings, maybe you need to expand. Can you expand your selection? Did you only look at this word in Paul? Maybe you need to look at this word in all of the New Testament. Expand your search. And if you're in the New Testament and you're using Greek, you can expand your search even to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. You can expand your search into non-biblical Greek, for instance. This would be most often classical Greek, and the easiest way to access that is through a lexicon like Liddell and Scott, which I have right here, Liddell and Scott. It's kind of an expensive, heavy book. Fifth, make a list now of all the possible meanings that you found for this word. Now, make your list, and then don't forget, file this study, as you should be filing all of the results of your Bible study. File this study in a way safely so that you can review this when you get to this word again. So you find as many verses as you can that use this word, and then read them in their context and try to see how many different meanings for this word are emerging here. Group them together somehow, color code them or group them together. Yeah, it means the same thing. These 5 verses, it all means this. Yeah, good. These 7 verses, it all means this. Good. And these 2 verses, it has a different meaning, but it's clear. And these verses, I don't know what it means. And then write it up so you clearly have this for the present study and for future studies. So that's the overview of the process of doing a word study. In our next lecture, we will look at doing the word study for the word charis. This is the end of lecture 18 in our study of hermeneutics.